All right, here we go. Okay, guys. So let's kick things off here. We can probably start off just by talking a little bit about what we are going to be doing next here. So up to now, it's been primarily like web page design and development that we've been doing. But in the earlier lab, I was mentioning that there's this other side to the web, which is web applications, which is getting a lot of attention these days and is maybe more valuable to learn. So the difference between the two is like, you go to a company's web page to get information, maybe see about motorbikes they sell or something like that. But it's mostly about just getting information. There's not really anything to install. You're not really intending to come back there a lot. Then you have your pages that fall kind of somewhere in between, like maybe New York Times or something. So you may come back more often. These days they might even have push notifications to tell you when there's new articles that you're interested in. But it's still mostly about reading information, but the content refreshes regularly, so you're probably going to come back more often. But then you have your full web application, which is like, this is a thing that is like a piece of software. This does something for you, right? So a good example, for instance, something I was thinking about from your guys' work, you have this thing for EB Games. What would turn that from an information site into something useful? Well, maybe it knows what games you've purchased. And it's got a list view that tells you about downloadable content for that. Useful, right? Click on it to say, yeah, I want to get that, send it to me. Another example is like the feed on Android, stuff like this, right? Where it's like, this is basically everything that's been going on your phone. So I see I should be teaching right now, which I am. So that's good. There's like another 3 new messages, and this kind of general activity feed is pretty common. This is an idea that extends out of social media a lot, right? Like your Facebook feed. Very similar actually to what we're seeing here. So these list views are probably like the most popular and useful thing in software development. And with websites becoming more like software and trying to do useful things so that people have a reason to come back to them, it's good to start applying some software ideas to your site. So this adds a layer of creativity, doesn't it? Because now we're not just thinking about like, how do we give the information through this thing? We're thinking like, what do people want the most? If you can take like an entire site and break it down to a little list view, you've really identified what's most important to people. That's an interesting challenge, isn't it? Like if you think of like a very large site, well, like the New York Times, what would they put in those notifications so that people would actually appreciate them and want to do something with them? They have a lot of content. Distilling that down to a list view, it's a bit of a challenge. So I like this exercise because it sort of makes you start thinking not just about graphic design, not just about how to make things pretty and make them not break when your browser resizes, but like, is it useful? And am I giving people what they actually want to do with this thing? So the reason why this is getting a lot of attention right now is because of a term called progressive web applications. Have you guys heard of this term? I would really recommend, if you have a little time, check out Google I/O. Just go on YouTube and look for some of their videos from their conference. And you will see this since 2016, a lot of conversation about this idea of progressive web applications. So if I'm going to kind of sum it up without going on too long, there's always been this fight between apps and the web, and for a long time, when the App Store was becoming quite popular, everyone was saying, oh, the web is dead. There's an app for everything, people are never going to go online anymore, and it's over for the web. But things have swung in the other direction, again, because the browsers and the makers of the browsers went to work making the browsers better. So there's actually tons of features built into the browser now that developers are just starting to make use of. And so a progressive web application, it offers a very app-like experience, but it's on the mobile web. Now the advantage of this is that there's nothing to install. The other big advantage is very, very lowered memory requirements. So I'll give you an example. Twitter, the Twitter app, if you download and install it, is about 140 megs. But the mobile version of Twitter, the progressive web app, is less than 1 meg. So like this, it's kind of like, so this is the web app, basically. So with this, you can install an icon to your home screen. You can get notifications, like everything that you would do with a native app, you can do with this. But then it also has features like if I click on my settings here, I can turn on this data saver mode. When I turn on the data saver mode, it will prevent loading the full version of any images or videos. It'll show like a little preview image of it. It cuts the data being used by 70% roughly, right? So it runs faster, nothing to install. And like if you're Twitter, if you're the company that's creating something like this, one of the big advantages is there's no like approval process for putting it in a store. You just give somebody the URL and they're good to go. So like when I shut this down, you can see like there's the icon on my, maybe you can see, it's on my home screen there, just the same as any of my other apps. When I click it and launch it, there it is. It remembers everything. It also runs offline. If your internet access drops out, it can do that. So, like, looking at this, like, is this what we picture of a website? Not really, right? But that's what I want to kind of impress to you guys, is that there's this whole area. This is what's coming. There's this whole area of opportunity emerging in building websites to function more like usable, functional, useful software rather than just informational pages. So I think we gotta try and do something like that, get a little taste of what that would look like. So I've got a couple of links to show you so that you can get a preview of what we're going to be working on. So today we will not be, we won't be forking the previous pen. You're going to be starting from a new pen. Nice, clean, fresh slate. We will be using the techniques we've learned, though. We'll be using the flexbox and rows and columns and that stuff. So it'll be a nice chance for us to get more practice on those things as well. Like this is why I say let's do this, because you're still getting the same skills. If you want to build a web page with the stuff we're learning, you could totally do it. But now you'll also be able to sort of plan a piece of software, which is good for you. So, all right.
Creating a new pen?
Yeah, new pen, and submit a brand new pen today.
If I accidentally
I need my projector.
submitted my old pen,
Ah,
screwed.
okay. You know what? Make a new pen,
Yep.
and put a comment, and I will fix that up. Get my projector rocking.
So just post in the comment section.
Yeah, and put a link to the actual. Oh man, I can tell already my audio is terrible. This microphone is like bouncing all over the place. Let me try and move it. Question? Yep. Oh, okay. So just go in and put a comment with your new pen, and I'll fix it up in the database after class. Yeah. Oh, I should have done this before I put my microphone on. Come on. Yes. So just for a minute, I'm going to jump to Lab 1 here, because I've got a link in here to some previous student work to do with the list view. So you can maybe take a quick look. Now, on some of these, you know, they're like a year old. This is kind of what I was mentioning, like if you hot link to images, they sometimes just go away or they get changed for another image. So some of these guys hot linked to images, so some of their, like the background of the Seneca Easy Eatery has disappeared. Some of the other images have disappeared. But you can get the idea here, right? So I thought this was actually a nice idea. And so like, even though you may not know how to build an entire application right now, you can build a nice visualization of what you'd like to be doing. And I would say the best way to visualize an app is by showing an activity feed like this, because it tends to be the summary of everything that's been going on in that app. So we basically build one list view like this. So this person's idea was pretty cool, actually. It was more inspired by the long lineups at the Tim Hortons and the idea that if we had this app where you and your friends could you know, connect with whoever's in line right now and tell them, hey, I want this, and that person would pick it up for you when they're at the front of the lineup, and that person would get their stuff paid for by everybody else for providing that service. So it's kind of like a crowdsourcing of waiting in lines, which I think is a pretty cool idea. Like, think how many places you could use that, right? Like concert tickets or anywhere there's a giant lineup like that would be pretty good. So even though our skills are still a bit basic at this level, doesn't mean we don't have good ideas. And this is a chance to show your good ideas. Let me show you another one here. So Terrace, I've got him in 4th semester right now. Oh no, sorry, this one's Slava's, yeah. Like his phone image background has disappeared, sorry. But you can still see the content that he had in mind here. So this was basically like a system for reviewing accommodations around the campus, basically. And so, you know, we're not worrying too much about where you'd be getting this information from. We're more or less visualizing the user interface for this thing. We would have other, you know, code monkeys working on the back end. So like, don't restrict yourself, is what I'm saying, in terms of the idea that you're working on. Now, what I've found is that people who get the most out of this exercise, they tend to be picking something they know about, you know, that they care about. So for Slava, like, he's coming from another country and he's like, where the hell am I gonna live? And so, you know, this is on his mind, and he'll make a good design because of that. Another one over here. Yeah, this is the one Terrace was working on. And so this one is like a scheduler thing. And I believe he's actually working with a company to actually build something like this. So he basically made use of this exercise to visualize this task scheduler thing that he had in mind. So you start to see, like, list views are extremely versatile. This one was interesting. This is like an app for sharing baby pictures. I do believe this person was pregnant. And, you know, so was thinking about, like, making this thing for sharing ultrasound pictures of the baby. It's kind of a cool idea, right? So some very unique ideas, and you can see they've done a good amount of work on the styling of this list view. So we're going to make a fairly basic list view together. We'll see how the pieces fit together and so forth. But it will be up to you to apply these styling touches to the thing and make it look like a nice professional looking list view. So I would recommend, if you haven't looked in it yet, you take yourself to material.io, go to the guidelines, the design guidelines here. The great resource is inside of components, and then right down here, lists. Now you'll see there's also like grid lists here. So for instance, Slava's was more like a grid list because it's got those, you know, nice big card images and stuff like that behind it. So that would also be pretty cool. But if you do a little scan through here, this can really up your game in terms of your design for the list view, because they get quite specific. And if you actually take a stab at implementing some of the specifics that they recommend here, you will probably see a really good result come out of it. So if we go down just a little bit here, so for instance right here, where we see like 16 point separation between your image and your edge there. God, I'm so gonna ruin this thing. I'm used to wandering back. You'll see like, well, when I see that, I'm like, oh, 16, that's 1 EM, right? 16 point is the baseline size of a font. So if I were to give a padding 1 EM around my image, or you could also do a margin, then you would basically be hitting their design spec, right? So a few things like that, just, you know, try them out. I mean, we're not going to be dogmatic. I'm not going to be checking like, oh, did you match 16 pixels exactly here? But what I'd say is, you know, if you're new to doing like this software type of design, then do give these recommendations a try, because they will definitely help you out. They even have recommendations in terms of like what is the preferred use for different types of lists. So for instance, Slava, he was making like an activity tracking thing. It's more like a software use. Well, you can see here, you know, what does a list view look like if it's got subfolders kind of thing. It looks pretty different from if it's, say, a contact list. They have a lot of things in common, but there are some differences. Also, some list views, the list items have, off to the right, they have this link, kind of like what we were doing last week. Some of them have links underneath. So they actually have another row underneath of the main list item with a couple of icons in there. A good example would be like social sharing. So if it's a, you know, Twitter, for example, you'll find icons underneath of the list items. So those are some things you can look at. And just, you know, keep an eye on the apps that you use, and just train yourself to be conscious of how they're doing it. And you will definitely have a lot of opportunity to do something interesting. I think that from most people's projects that I've seen up to now, you probably could come up with something. You know, like my thought about Vince's is just off the top of my head, but all the ones that I've seen, I'm looking at it, I'm like, what would a list view for Adventure Time be like? You know what I mean? What would be the important thing? If I'm an enthusiast about Adventure Time, what's the most important thing to me? I forget who's doing Adventure Time. Somebody, yeah. Any ideas? You know? What would I want to know about? What would be the best summary? What would be usable to me? So you get?
New episodes, maybe?
That would be a great example. Yeah. Actually, are they still making it? Is there? They are? Okay, so that would be a perfect example. You know, but there's others as well, right? What if, let's take a social aspect on that. Maybe I want to know what are the top rated episodes of my Friends. That would be another good example. You know, so once the gears start turning, I bet you're gonna have some good ideas. My recommendation, I do this. Carry a little sketchbook with you. I know it's old school, but carry a little sketchbook and a pencil. And when you have an idea, just jot it down so it doesn't get away from you. And I guarantee you, if you do that, it will definitely help you out. Okay, so let's look at a couple of the. So those are a couple of examples you could look at, and there's a link on Lab 1. But let me head back to the current lab here, which is Lab 4. You can't log in? What message are you getting?
The username or password I entered is incorrect.
Then I think you got a typo.
I know it's correct. Every time I type the same thing, but this time it doesn't work.
Okay, there should be a new password option there. It will send you a link that will let you pick a new password, like a forgot password.
Okay.
Try that one. Yeah, if it still gives you a hard time, let me know. Oh, we still need a few people to make a new pen and enter it in there. So we'll give a couple of minutes just while folks are joining in. Maybe we could take a look at a couple more here. So this one was done by Mike, who went through the program a couple years ago. It's basically like a feed for fans of old films, you know, classic film fans, basically. So here what we've done is basically created like a page that would direct you to the App Store for the thing. So I want to do this because like one student that I had before, Mike, he kept working on his thing, and he actually did turn it into a full app and made it available on the App Store, and he also made it available as a web application, and that was super impressive. A lot of employers were really impressed by seeing that. I've hired him as a subcontractor a few times, and his career is just taken off. So, so this project is kind of inspired by what he did. Then another one over here, another take on things, is Devin did this. So this is she was attending the FITC conference, so she did this as a mock-up, and she took the actual event information and speakers and so forth, and she thought like this would be useful for somebody at the conference. Because it's pretty big, there's a lot of speakers and it's hard to remember what's going on when, so she made this schedule mock-up for the thing. It's not fully functional, but it is partially functional. It's got like some basic filtering in there, which is pretty cool. And again, dropped it in a design that you would use to direct attention to the App Store. So I feel like this is a fairly exciting project to do, and not, you know, we will get a lot of benefit out of it without like super taxing ourselves to build an entire site. You know what I mean? So we're not killing ourselves, and we're getting something cool, and that's what I want to do. All right, so that's kind of our goal. So let me show you a little simple breakdown of a list view right here. And it's just kind of the parts of the thing. And I've kept them really basic, and I've put borders around them. Yeah. Yes, thanks. Oh, Code Pen. Yeah, I can't help you with that. Sorry, I thought you were saying you couldn't log into Leaflet. Check your email that you're using for Code Pen. If you do a search, do you find anything? Because sometimes it might go in a spam folder or something.
It's so weird. Last time that I uploaded it on it said there's none. But I double checked.
Interesting. Let's check your earlier. This is why I love this. it's really weird. It seems like your account is kind of closed.
Yeah, something like that. It was like
Yeah, it was there before, definitely. I remember, yes, because at the second feedback, your thing wasn't there anymore. Yeah. Okay, here's what I'll suggest. Make a new CodePen account, all right, and use their support. They're actually very good at getting back to you. The support area, and I've used it a few times. And you should tell them what your account is. For now, I'd make a new one. Yeah, I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Yes. So open up your pen and then copy the URL. Oh, and we must make sure it's saved at least once. Yeah. Yep. I'm back into Leaflet. And today we're on lab 4, which is track get. Boom. Good to go. You're locked in. From a previous lab? Okay. Okay. Which lab are you missing? You know? Let's take a look at lab 3. That is a bit of a problem because we are now past that. Click on, go back to culture. Click on comments. Slide 27. So I'm looking at when you did it. Because if it was after the due date, then I can't really help you. But check with me after class. You did. Oh, and it let you set it up?
yes.
Wow. Okay, then there's definitely was a problem with that. Yeah. You should. Yeah, that is pretty problematic.
That's the iPhone late.
Well, the good news is we're starting.
I don't think it's
Leaflet.
gonna call default.
So, but you should definitely send them, like use their contact and send them.
I don't like this thing. I like that one.
Yeah, because they're actually very good with their support, and you should tell them that you're. Yeah, I can look up in the database the URLs that you
Apple still
submitted.
deal with it.
Like, then if they use those.
Those apps still bigger
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You should use this. Send them a notice.
Drop down, yeah, look at that drop down.
Like your account disappears. Yeah. They will help you. They've helped me several times.
Yeah, here's the motor. Here you go.
Say that again. Yeah.
Class ends at 2, right?
Or Leaflet.
I'm gonna go leave early as
I don't know anything about that. It's the free account on CodePen.
Yeah, and we'll do the start dates or something. If I find it. I know, sorry. I'm really confused.
It sounds like it's Leaflet though. Yeah.
You're probably right.
This is Leaflet.
Yeah.
Yeah, CodePen is completely different. It's the code editor.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so let me get in there with you guys, and we can kick it off. Let's get some code going on here. So I'm going to open up my Professor Mode session. Oops. Okay, let me make a new. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to post the Professor Mode session, so anybody who wants can join me. Just give me 1 second. All right. Okay, Professor Mode, up and running. Question?
I found that Leaflet Code page.
Yeah, this is Leaflet.
Yeah,
It's not code.
sorry.
So wait, are you saying you're not actually enrolled? Because we're in week 5 now. So that means like for more than a month you haven't been doing anything.
No, because I just came back in the middle of last week.
Why?
Because I was ill. I was in and out of the emergency, so I started meeting with
Okay, so you're gonna have to get a form from the doctor and make sure that you let Joe know about that, and then I'm gonna need a copy of that.
I have to write the medical notes right now.
Okay. I'm gonna have to help you out afterwards
Okay.
because the enrollment's already closed. So.
There's another one. I can't submit my name. There must be some problem.
This is my link.
Yeah, I have another one. I
you
can
can
sign
submit
up.
mine.
Isn't it?
I think you haven't saved it.
This is why I love this phone. Right, you have to
It's the one that you submitted if it's not saved.
because I got to go back and do it, but they just, but yeah. Like,
Now that you've saved it,
like,
copy
my
it.
day, like, actually, my day was like that. So now I just went outside.
Yeah. It's for your protection. If it isn't saved,
Like,
it won't let you
wake
save
up,
it.
like, pull on my phone. That's what I'm doing. And some of those things,
Okay. All right. So let's get in there. Let's start making an HTML page, a basic HTML page. We're still going to need that. But we're going to create an area that we're actually going to dynamically make using JavaScript. So we'll get a little taste of JavaScript probably towards the end of class today. In the beginning, we're just going to focus on making a simple little single list item, and then we'll see how we can use that as a template to duplicate however many list items we need. That's the plan. So I would say definitely do make a pen. Sorry, I don't know your name. Elihad. Definitely do make a pen, and I'll have to get it from you, and I'll get you set up and put you in the database. I'm sorry about that, but it's like it auto closes after a certain amount of time, and Nobody told me there was another person. So, but we'll get you taken care of here. All right, so let's start off with our basic HTML page, just like we always do. Give yourself a head tag in there, just like that. Let's throw a title in there, pretty important for a list feed. And I'll just call it an activity feed. There we go. Okay, so going to need a body as well.
Sorry, sir. Do you want us to clear up all code, like in our project?
You're making a new pen. Yeah. We are starting fresh. But we will be using some of the stuff that we've made previously. Okay. So inside the body, let's use one of the HTML5 elements that we have available. We'll call it the section. It's kind of like a div, but it's a little more descriptive to screen readers. And let's give it an ID, which we will call our feed. Close out the section. So we're just about set up as far as the HTML goes. Let's do some CSS action. Can anybody remember the two things that we put in a CSS reset? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah. And one more. You're on the right path. Yes, box sizing, border box. So let's throw that in there using that universal selector. So this first one, just to remind you, it's generally just easier to kill all the margins because margins are a real pain in the butt in CSS. They're very unpredictable. Padding is a lot easier to work with. So for this second one, we say box sizing, border box, and what that does is it basically makes our padding always try to expand inwards so that we never have it randomly trying to push outwards and maybe messing up our layout. So let's get that in there. That's a pretty good start. I'm going to right away bring in a font for my use because the default fonts, you know, they're pretty amateur looking. So let's get in the habit of using a custom font. I'm going to go for Roboto, which is Google's like recommended font for material design. It's quite nice. I mean, it is getting used a lot, but there's a reason. It's pretty good. /CSS. And then when you do this import, you can specify what font weights you want, right? Which is a good idea because otherwise it'll give you all of them. And that's going to be a pretty big download. So in here, I can say family equals Roboto. And then right after that, I'll say give me 100. I'm going to get 300, 400. That should be pretty good. So I'm giving myself like three weights of fonts by doing this. And then I'm going to do an element selector for the body, and I'll just apply this font. So this way, you know, pretty much everywhere I'm replacing the fonts, the built-in fonts, with something a little nicer here. So Roboto, but it's probably a good idea to put a fallback. So let's say, for instance, it would be rare, but let's say the person dropped offline in the middle of downloading the font or something like that. You can put a sans serif, which is a device font. It's built into the browser, so that one will always load, just in case the Roboto doesn't. Question? Oh, take it. Oh my gosh. Thank you, sir. Woo. Avoid embarrassment. Thanks. Let's test it. Throw a little H1 in here. Hey, Mom. Yeah, that looks Roboto to me. Very good. Okay, so let me get rid of this hi mom here, and instead I'm going to put in here an unordered list, a UL. You guys familiar with unordered list? You got two types. You have the OL, the ordered list, and you have the unordered list. Now by default, list items in the unordered list show up like bullet points. So if we put a little regular list item in here, see how we're picking up that bullet point by default? Now this is not exactly what we want, so we're probably going to have to override some of the built-in styles here, the user agent styles. So try this out. Over in your CSS, let's make a selector for that unordered list. We give it a list style type of none. Bonk. So it gets rid of the little disk. Actually, there's a few more values there. If you are using regular list items, there's the disk, which is what we're seeing there, but there's also a box. I think there's an arrow you can use, so there are some things like that. We're just going to kill it because we're going to do a completely custom style here. But you'll notice like it's still indented there, and the way it's doing the indenting is with a padding. So we should probably kill this padding left at the same time. Make it a 0. So the good thing about doing it this way instead of like using a div, because like there's no reason you can't put a div inside of an unordered list like this, but the browsers will complain because semantically it's not correct. So if it's a strict browser, it can cause problems. Even if it's not a strict browser, it's still kind of bad, and you'll take a hit in terms of your search engine optimization. So, so we'll use the proper semantic list item. There's no reason not to use it. Doop, 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 doo. Okay, let's get a row going on here. Guys, remember how to set up your row? if you're using the Flexbox. So we're going to make a row class, set the display to flex. So now we're doing Flexbox stuff. So if I want my boxes to align horizontally, I'm going to set flex direction row. We should set a width of 100%. That'll work for now. We might come back to this and apply a little bit more styles to it. And I want to show you guys a new type of selector that I haven't showed you before, an attribute selector. So what I mean by that is, if we look at what we've got so far, this UL selector, it's called an element selector because it's using the element itself. Down here, class selector, because it's going to do it based on class, and we know we can use that class in multiple places, so it will select anything that has this class in it. But there's another type of selector here that's pretty useful for you. It's called an attribute selector. Now this is going to look a little weird, but try this out. We're going to say class star equals, and then you're going to put a quote, COL dash. This is looking pretty nuts, right? You've seen something like this before? This is super handy. I'll explain what we're making here. So this is called an attribute selector because of those square brackets that we see there. So what do we mean by an attribute? Well, let's say for instance, just to demonstrate over here, let's say you have something like an image. Well, the source, you know, when you fill that in to put an image on the page, source is an attribute. So anything that's inside of these arrow brackets here that isn't the tag is an attribute, right? So we can use them all over the place. This selector that I'm creating here is kind of special. See how we've got this little star in here, the little asterisk? What this is saying is basically select anything where the class has inside of it COL dash. You know what I mean? So for instance, if I put a, let me try this right here. If I take this list item and I say class equals COL dash, hi mom, then over here, see how that's selected, right? So it's a way that you can say, hey, any classes that have this little chunk of text in them, I want to select. That's pretty powerful if you think about it, right? It's pretty cool. So look what we can do in addition to that. So up to now, our columns that we've been using, they've pretty much been uniform width, right? They've been exactly the same width and spacing, which is the simplest way to do it, because the Flexbox will just do it for you. But in reality, you're probably going to want columns with different widths, right? So we can actually make a little set of classes like this, and this is actually kind of how Bootstrap does it. We can make a little set of classes where we can specify ahead of time, oh, I want a, 1/3 width column, or I want a half size column. And so let's try this. I'm going to say dot COL, and this is kind of how the naming convention works. A lot of systems do it this way. I'm going to say -1, -1. This one, I'm going to give it a width of 100%. Now here's what I'm doing. I'm saying this is 1 of 1. right? So what that means is this column is going to be 100% wide, because 1 divided by 1 is 1, so it's 100%. Let's say I want to have a couple columns that are half the width of the screen. Well, then maybe I want to do something like .col 1, 2. What do you think my width will be? 50%, yeah. So this is, this is basically exactly the way that systems like Bootstrap do it. So what's going to happen there is that right up here, this selector is going to get applied to all columns because they all have the COL dash in them. But the two numbers we put after it, we can say whatever width we want. So now we're kind of adding on the ability to have multi-width columns inside of our rows, which is, it should let us do some pretty good stuff. So here's what I'd suggest we should do inside of this little universal selector here. Give yourself an overflow hidden. Now, have you guys used that one before? This is a good one to know about. It will basically prevent any of your content from accidentally spilling out of its borders inside of your columns here. So like if our responsive design is good, nothing should ever really bust out of its border, but you never know, it can happen, a positioning problem or something like that. Suddenly you've got this chunk of content like hanging out the side and overlapping other stuff doesn't look very good. Overflow hidden is exactly like making a mask in Photoshop. Right? It basically says this element, like if something spills off the side, like just hide it. Like don't make it visible, which is probably better than having it like overlapping something else. So we're just kind of covering our butts here, saying like never let anything spill out. Why don't you give yourself another column? See if you can figure out how would you do one for a column that's 1/3. Give it a try. Go for it. So with our 100% width, we said 1 of 1. For our 50%, we said 1 of 2. So it could be 1 of 3. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a trick question, right? Because it's like 33.33333. But along that note, if we go ahead and do our 1 of 3. I mean, you can go nuts with the 3s. It's not going to make a big difference. The reason why it's not going to make a big difference, though, is because of that CSS reset we did in the beginning there, where we said always expand inwards. Because sometimes those little fractions like that can get interpreted as 1 extra pixel and throw off your whole layout. So, oh God, I wish someone would have told me that. Like the first 2-3 years I was doing this stuff. Oh God, those rough times, man. So this is starting to come together pretty good. We could build some things with this. Let's see if we can get something showing up here. Let's take our list item here. Get rid of my hi mom. And let's use this row. Now, let's do something here. Just for now, let's give our rows a border, just so we can see what they're doing, right? So let's go border 1 pixel solid red. I do this a lot, just so that I can sometimes I'll do this. I'll go right up to the universal selector, and I'll throw a border in here you know, then you'll get a visible border on every damn thing in your page, which can be really helpful when you're doing layout, and then you just remove it afterwards. So it's a good thing to know about. So here's my row. And if we think back to what we were doing last week, or even some of the examples we looked at today, list item usually always has kind of 3 things side by side. You're usually going to have like an icon or an image. So if it's contacts, maybe it's an avatar picture. Then we're going to have a little chunk that's some kind of piece of information. Might be 2 lines, might be 3 lines. And then we'll often have beside that some kind of a link, some sort of like call to action thing you can do with it. Not always. And then optionally we'll sometimes have like a little border underneath to delineate them. They get pretty specific on that stuff in the design guidelines. Like they even have recommendations for those borders. Like if it's an avatar picture, don't extend the border underneath of the avatar, have it stop on the side there. So like those are really up to you. I'm not going to be that picky. So let's see if we can just get some markup in here for what we need roughly. So if you notice, we've set the display to flex and the flex direction to row. So whatever we put in our list item here should start lining up side by side. So let's get rid of this little placeholder here. And so on the left, I'm probably going to want some kind of like an icon, right? So let's throw like a simple little div in here. And let's give it a class of icon. Now next to our icon, that's where we want like our little information section. So we might as well put a div in there for that. And then one more. And this one's going to be something like link. We're definitely going to iterate on this a little bit, but this will give us the basics that we need. So, you guys remember our little trick for images and icons and stuff from last week? Rather than using the image element, which is a little bit limited in what it can do, a nice trick is to use a background image. So let's head on over here to the CSS. The CSS. And let's make a style for the icon. What's a good size? What size do we want to make this? 54 pixels. Sounds good. 54 sounds good. I mean, again, like that's just one of the Google recommendations. They base it on the physical size. So if we want to make this a clickable item, it's big enough to actually tap on with the typical mobile device. So let's go width, 54 pixels, height, 54 pixels. There we go. So you see how my border automatically got bigger there? Because this is what we want, right? Like we never want to set explicit width and height usually on the outer element. We want to let it grow to accommodate the content inside. So we apply those kind of specifics to the content inside. This way we won't be breaking responsive when this thing starts scaling around. All right, so we got an icon in there. Let's give it an image. Let's see. What should I be building, guys? My little example is like a video game feed. So let's see. I'll just look for some kind of game icon, PNG. Actually, I think this is the one I was using. Oh yeah. Yeah, this looks pretty good. Is it a secure image? Let's see. Probably not. So this is what I mean. If it doesn't start with the HTTPS, then there's a good chance this image is eventually going to disappear out of my design. So when you're doing this thing, you might want to host the image yourself or look for links that are HTTPS. But this will do for now. Let me grab this bad boy. Head on back. And throw it in a background. It's the URL value is what I'm after here. And we got to put a round bracket, got to put a quote, and boom, stick it on in there. Anybody can tell me why I'm not seeing anything? If we look back here, it's pretty big, right? My box is 54 by 54 pixels. So I technically am seeing transparent pixels. I'm seeing the top left corner where it's all empty, right? So we need to apply a couple more properties here. Yeah, there we go. So let's do that one first. So background, position. This stuff will become like second nature to you guys. I'm going to go with center right there, I think. Okay, right? So like now my problem is that it's centered, but it's still too large. So the option I like to use is the good old background size. Now, you know what? I always typo on this. I always go background sizing, and it's wrong. And I can't stop myself. I still do it. It's actually background size, not sizing. And then the good option I like to use is cover. There we go. No repeat would be a good idea. When my image is perfectly square like this, usually I won't see a repeat in there. But to be safe, background repeat, and set it to no repeat is a good idea. I like that. All right, it's already starting to get better, don't you think? It's being more list-like already. So there's an icon. What about the info? So in the info area, usually we're going to want to have at least 2 lines of text, right? And then, you know, in a lot of the examples we saw, the first line is kind of bold, and then the secondary line is maybe just like a paragraph tag or something. So we might have to nest a little bit of stuff inside of this div here. So, so let's do it. Let's say our first line, if we want it to be a little more bold, maybe it's like an H4. Something like that. Man, that font is nice, don't you think? It's so crisp. They did a good job with that. After the H4, maybe we want to, I don't know, use like a paragraph tag. All right. I'm liking this. It's going pretty good. Okay, let's we'll do a little bit of work on centering this up, but we'll come back to that. Let's get our third element in there because like it's usually better to get all the stuff there before you start playing with alignment. Because otherwise what happens is then you add in another thing and it's blah. It all goes nuts on you. So let's get the third one in there, which is, what did we want? Oh yeah, link, yeah. So, I mean, there's a few ways we could do it, right? If we want to do a proper anchor tag and give it an href. Now a little trick you can do, if you just put a pound in your href there, it will still apply all the styles, like hover styles and things like that. But if if you click on it, it just won't go anywhere. So it's a great way of like testing your styles and seeing how they look and stuff without putting an actual link in there. So let's put that pound in there, and I'll just say link. There we go. So we get the really ugly like default link in there. But I'm thinking what I'm probably going to do is replace that guy with a button or something anyway. That'll be a lot nicer. So, pretty good. It is a little like jammed in the corner though, right? We should probably do a bit of work with spacing inside of here. I think it's probably a good chance to try some of those columns that we made there. So let's say we wanted to space this out by thirds. Let's go to our info here. Now you can put more than one class inside of your class attribute, right? So I've got the info one in there. Let me see what happens if I go column 1 of 2. Hi-oh. See what's happening there? So like my middle one now is taking 50% of the available screen width. That's pretty good. Let's try our thirds. So 3. Okay. If we do the same thing for the link, column 1 of 3. Oops, 3. Now the icon, we may run into a bit of an issue if we just try and stick a column class inside of here, right? Because this guy's counting on being a certain size for displaying our icon properly. So the thing we would do here is just wrap it. And what I mean by that is we just put another div around it, just like this, and we give that the column that we want. So I'll say column 1 of 3. Oop. So you just got to be careful that you put the closing after the end of your icon. So let me reformat that a little bit. There. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah. So we've basically now got like an exact even 3 columns there. So this is getting pretty good.
Where did you close this last year?
Right after my icon closing. Yeah. I don't know if I showed you guys last week. There's a couple of little handy tools up here in the little drop down. Tidy HTML will try and format all your HTML and like tab it properly so it all looks nice. I like that one because if I don't have a closing, then it will basically stop at the point where I'm missing a closing and it will still be all like messed up looking. So it can sometimes help. There's also a little analyzer built into here. And sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not. If you click this Analyze HTML, it's going to give you some little tips about what could possibly be wrong. So this one is telling me, well, you know what? This is legit. It is saying you have a class called info, you have a class called link, and you're not using them. They're basically empty. You could get rid of them. But I know that I actually want to use them, so I'll keep them around. Those tools are pretty good. Okay. I'm thinking what we could maybe do here is like restrict the width a little bit, because I want to see what this is going to look like on something more like a phone screen. So we could do it a few different ways. Let's look to our section here with the ID called feed. Let's make a little selector for that feed. And I'm not going to give it a width. I'm actually going to give it a max width, which is slightly different. if I give it a set width, it will only ever be that width, but max width will allow it to shrink down as we move the browser. So we'll still be able to test our responsive, but we just won't have it stretching all the way across the screen. So if I go like max width, I don't know, typical 460 pixels, it's about, it looks big still on a desktop screen, but that is about what you are going to be seeing on a mobile device. 460 pixels of width is pretty typical. It's just that on the mobile device, the pixels are much smaller. The density is much greater, but this will be a pretty good test for us. How you guys feeling about that link? I don't know. Oh, really? Guys want to do some debug action?
I submitted there.
Yeah, let's take a look. Doop, doop, doop. Okay. And let's check if there's a selector for feed. Yep. Oh, I need the pixels.
Wow.
Burn.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I like the icon. That's cool. Anybody else want me to take a look? If you are joining us or you didn't catch last week, this is basically your chance to submit your stuff and I can help you out.
Is there a way in the link I submitted you where I have like my name, it's like pressed up right against the box?
Sorry, am I looking at the chat window or your code?
Yeah,
Oh, here,
so
yeah.
like my name is pushed up.
Yeah.
Is there a way to like bring that?
We're going to look at a couple of options for that. Yeah, that's on deck. But I like how this is evolving. You know, makes me think like you already had some idea that you're gonna work on here. It's pretty cool. Like those columns, you know, they'll allow you to play around with your layout here, right? So, like, cause like this is, you know, this is probably too wide for my icon area over here. Maybe not. It depends what I want, but let's say I wanted to make that a good deal smaller. Maybe I make a column that's like 1 of 6 or something like that. And then I can make another one that's like 5 of 6. Now I'd have a very small column on the left and a lot more room to work with on the right. And you can get even further with that because you could actually go inside that 5 of 6 and put another row in there of columns. See what I'm saying? You can nest them inside of each other. So you can actually get a very sophisticated layout going with just a few columns. Now, I try to not get too crazy with that. I try to not nest them so deeply because it can get pretty difficult for you. And generally, you're not going to need to nest more than 1 or 2 levels deep to make something that's pretty responsive and good. So simple, good. look at like Google's designs. It's pretty simple, you know. There's not a lot of huge complexity in it. They try and keep it pretty straightforward. Okay, let's see here. What if so we've got a couple of options in terms of layout because the Flexbox gives us 2 more properties. There's the justify content, which is used for arranging things on the axis. We've got the align items, which is used for arranging things on the cross axis. So when I say axis or cross axis, you kind of have to describe it that way because like you can switch between row and column with the flex direction. So let me see if I can describe it properly. If my flex direction is set to row and this is my axis and I'm using justify content to arrange things this way, well, if I change the flex direction this, justify content is now going to arrange things this way. You see what I mean? Yes, exactly, like changing between portrait and landscape. So let's give it a try here. Let's see. We've got our row, and it is set to flex direction row. If we do an align items on our row with a center option, see that? It was subtle, but you see what happened there? You'll probably notice it more because you've got a little bit more space. Yeah. And you know, so now they're automatically lining up. Now here's the thing with using Flexbox and these type of options. You kind of have to get yourself away from thinking so super specific in terms of your design. Like in days past, we would get a Photoshop comp of the thing, and our job was to recreate it exactly like the Photoshop document. And it's taken a few years for people to come around to the fact that that's not a good way of doing things anymore, just because there's so much variance in the screen sizes and so forth. So we shoot instead for like the general principle of the thing, not like a super specific pixel perfect thing. You know what I'm talking about. You know, because like before we used to just chop things up, right? We'd chop it up into boxes, we'd put the boxes on the screen, and you're done. But this is before screens did this, and we're on a watch and your phone and so forth. So I feel like what we have here is a pretty good option, you know? We could definitely advance this a little bit further, but I know it's going to be nicely aligned vertically. It's exactly 1/3 columns. I'm not crazy about the amount of space in between the little icon and my text here. There's a few ways we could fudge it. So we could talk about the position property now, because the position property, if you set it to a value like relative, it allows you to kind of nudge things around a little bit. It literally lifts them out of their normal place where they are and lets you like move it around a bit. So what you don't want to do with position property is like do your layout with that, because responsively it's going to kill you. But if you just want to move things a little bit, it can help you out. So let's see if we can, let's see what we can do with a position property here. So this is where our little info class is going to come in handy here, because we can now use that to target just our little info area here and try a few things with it. Let's see if this works. So I'll target the info class, and I'm going to set position to relative. Let's try something. I'm going to say left minus 20 pixels. Hey-oh, see that? Let me push it a little further here. I'm at 30. You know what I mean? That's the good use of position, is like subtle, little small movements. If you are counting on, because like even right now, if I start resizing, you know what, that's not bad. It's not bad. But what's happening here is like, when you use position relative, what the browser does is it calculates where the thing originally is, and then it lifts it literally, almost like making a new layer in Photoshop. It lifts it out of the page flow, and it pushes it over however much you're asking for. But it still reserves that space that it was in, and it won't let any content flow into that space there. So this is why I say like it's good for little small movements, but if you're trying to use it to move things like pretty far, you're going to have a big giant hole in your design that no other content will flow into. And this can become even more noticeable once you start trying to use the responsive. So as a rule of thumb, if you like giving yourself a little rule, you know, don't move anything more than say 50 pixels with position. Now that's a kind of a blunt rule. There are times when you would not do that, but when you're getting started, it's not a bad little rule to set for yourself. But I don't know, I feel like that's pretty good. What do you guys think? It's pretty nice, right? Cool, cool. Now if we were to take this one here and copy it, so let's say I've taken this whole row here, the whole list item. Boop. Copy that whole thing and paste it. Paste again. We're starting to have something going on, right? Like this is going to be pretty good. Maybe I'll kill that red border. And maybe instead, I'll give it like a little gray border bottom. All right. And responsively, it's still, you know, still pretty good. I think I should throw a bit of spacing around that icon. It is jammed a little close to the side, right? So maybe we do something with that. Now, if you remember from last class when we were doing our little work on the logo, we originally tried to do it with padding, and we didn't see any result from that. Yeah, margin's a better option because, like, technically that div has no content in it because backgrounds don't count as content. So the padding has no way of like calculating the space we're trying to do. Margins go around the outside, so they'll work. So let's see. Let's see here. That was the icon class. I can probably, there's two ways I can go. If I apply margin right here, not bad. Maybe I only want it on the left. Yeah, not bad. Could probably go a little more even. Okay, okay, that's pretty decent. I'm liking that. Now what if we want more than one icon, right? Because the idea, like, behind an activity feed is like, it's different things that are going on. So I'm probably not going to want to use the same icon every time. I'm going to want to be able to use like different icons for different activities. So there's a couple ways you could do it. Let's say we want to support like 3 or 4 different icons. Like maybe we have one that is new post. Well, we can do it by making a different class and applying a different background. So let's see if I can find a little new post icon of some kind. I mean, I'm not in love with any of these. What do you guys think? I don't know, maybe this guy? Yeah, okay. Now this is where our use of a background image with its options for like resizing and preserving the aspect ratio come in real handy. Because most likely the images we're using are not going to be the exact same size and exact same layout. And it should do a pretty good job of accommodating it. So let me grab this one. Head on back in here. And here's what we'll do. I'm going to go background and set this up to use my other icon here. There we go. And I'm going to rearrange my little icon class that I made previously. I'm going to break it up a little bit. I'm going to take its background property out and put it in like gaming. Right? So let me take this, put this in here. So what we're shooting for here is like the icon class is going to set the sizing, it's going to set the general spacing of the thing, and then we'll add in another class to specify which image we want to use.
I can call these whatever I want then, right?
That's right. Yeah. Let's see. So right now, like the good thing is, it's not, my layout's not broken. Even though the image is not visible right now, it hasn't all collapsed because we're not using an image tag. We're using a background, and the icon class is still applied. So let's see if I can get one of these showing my gaming. So we'll apply two classes. Gaming. Yes, I always forget about this. When you set a background to be a URL, you must also move the other properties like position, size, and repeat with it. So we'll have to just change this just a little bit to put it in there. There we go. And unfortunately, you'll have to repeat it for each of the icons that you want to use. I'm not sure why that is. I feel like I shouldn't have to repeat them, but CSS, man. So let's try a new post on the second one here. So if I go to my next icon here, and I say new post. Hey, that actually worked out pretty good. That doesn't look too bad. So this is how we can have, you know, however many icons we want. So you probably would want to, like, I'm not sure, are you guys doing like any work in Illustrator or Photoshop right now? You know, it might be some good practice. Make yourself a little icon set for use. That'd be nice. I'll just stick to gaming and the other two here. Oop. You know, like, to be honest with you guys, this is what I like about this program, you know? Because we're not just like doing hardcore code all the time. I've mentioned before, like, when you're doing your code, take breaks, have more frequent sessions. So a good thing is, like, if I'm working on something like this, take a little break to just draw some icons or something. It really refreshes you, I find. You're not just stuck there grinding on code forever. Yeah, this is shaping up. I'm liking this. I think we're just about ready to take a little stroll into JavaScript. Let me do one more thing. With my row here, I feel like I want to put a little subtle box shadow action on there. So this is going to look a little weird. I never remember the order of box shadow. So I've got some standard box shadows that I like to use. Basically, each of these properties indicates one side of the box shadow. So by saying 0, 1 pixel, 3 pixel, I believe the 0 is going to be the top of the box, so no shadow up there. 1 pixel of shadow on the right-hand side, and then 3 underneath. And then the next property I'm putting in here is just an RGB alpha value. So I'm going to say black, 0, 0, 0. But then I'm going to set it to like 0.12% opacity, right? So it won't be like a solid thick box shadow. It will be partially transparent. And and then another one. There is a handy tool online. If you do a search for box shadow generator, somebody made a GUI that will actually output these values for you, and you can copy paste them into your CSS. So that's pretty nice. 0, oops, 0, ah, God, can't type. Ah, God, yeah, there we go. 0.24, and I think we're good. So it's subtle, but there is a little bit of small amount of box shadow there. If I remove the border, you probably would see it a little better. Let me take this out of here for a second. There you go. It's a little more material designy, I would say. Now we're really noticing that it's pretty tight in this middle section here. Now that section, we can deal with padding. Because it's text-based and not a background, then our padding should work out for us. So you'll notice that we originally put in another little div here, or another class called info. So let's use that one. Do a little bit of padding action. Something like that. Come on. Anybody see what I did wrong? Why it's not happening?
No dot.
Yeah, no dot. You know, you could have let me know, dude. Just let me burn, eh? All right. Okay, this is yeah, I'm liking this. I think I won't probably do it today. I'll circle back on those links, and we'll look at some of the options you can do for making some good-looking buttons. Actually, though, I noticed some of you guys already were doing some button stylings, so I would encourage you to definitely do something with that. I mean, what they'll often do rather than a text-based link is some kind of icon over there as well. And it tends to be like a desaturated icon and smaller than the one on the left because it's a secondary information. So if you want to, give that a try, you know? Because you can use this like background image thing on that side as well. That'd be pretty good. Yeah?
Is it possible to just turn on like one or two couple of buttons? Just so
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, go for it. I can't because I'm tethered. This microphone's got me. Oh wait, I have switches. Hold on. Yeah, I would prefer to because I find I'm more attractive when in dim light. Yeah, hold on. Now we're in the dark.
perfect.
Okay, everybody's good with this?
Thank you.
All right. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean with more attractive. Okay, yeah, I'm liking this. So here's the thing. Like, we're doing this all by hand inside of the HTML. But typically this would be done with some code that generates this for us, right? So we're going to do a little bit of work inside of JavaScript here. I know you guys haven't had too much opportunity to work with JavaScript. In coming semesters, you'll do more with it. But I can get you the basics, and I can show you what the role of JavaScript in this scenario is. So JavaScript allows us to write applications that essentially does exactly what we humans are doing right now. It allows us to use code to write HTML. And not just write it, It can also be used to select areas of the HTML and alter it. So think of a scenario where maybe you need to be logged in to see some content, right? So that's JavaScript working in the background, making a decision to say, okay, once the person's logged in, I'm going to alter part of this page, and now you can see the content. So let's do a little bit of stuff here, and let's see if we can just demo what that means. So the first thing I'll get you guys to do, and don't miss this, you're going to click on the little gear in the JavaScript box, and we're going to go to this JavaScript Preprocessor. See that one? Everybody can find this area? Yeah, it's the little gear right here on your JavaScript box. And we click that one. And then hopefully it's already highlighted the JavaScript area. Can you see that one? So it's right here. See this little small icon? So we're going to click on that. And then in the JavaScript tab, under Preprocessor, you're going to click on this last one here, called Babel, or Babel. I don't know how you... I've heard multiple ways of saying it. I say Babel. So you're going to click on that, and once you've done that, you're going to click Save and Close down at the bottom here. So the reason why we're doing this is because JavaScript in 2015 got an update. And they improved a lot of things, and they fixed a lot of bugs and so forth. But there are still people on browsers out there that are like pre-2015 and you know, can't handle the new JavaScript. So what this tool does, it allows us to write the new modern JavaScript, but it actually converts it to the old style JavaScript if the person happens to be on a browser that can't support the new stuff. So it just makes us safe to work in the new stuff and still support the legacy browsers. So we're going to turn that one on, and let's kick the tires on this. Let's do a little thing here. So my first list item here where it says first line info, that's pretty generic, right? This is usually where there would be like some kind of notice, like maybe somebody started playing a game or somebody did a purchase, anything like that. So here's what we're going to do. Let's go to our HTML, where that is. Right here, it's this H4. Let's do a little demonstration here. Give this guy an ID. Let's just call him Demo. So it's my first line up here. Give a little ID called Demo. And then I'm going to head over to my JavaScript here. And follow me on this little line of code here. I'm going to say document. So what is the document? Well, document refers to what they call the DOM, the document object model. And that's just a fancy name for like all of my HTML and all my CSS and all the settings of what we're seeing here is all wrapped up inside this one thing called the document. So we typically, if we're going to affect anything we're seeing here, we're going to do it through that document. It's exactly like if you open up a document in Word, you have to open that document before you can start editing it, right? So this is us in JavaScript opening this document. The next thing I'll get you to do, put a little dot, and you're going to say query selector. So this is a tool that we can use to create selectors very similar to CSS selectors. So for instance, like here, let me pause that for a second just by commenting it out. In JavaScript, if you want to make a comment / is what you want. So I'm gonna turn that off for just a second. Let me go back to my CSS. And if I was going to target this first line of text here in CSS, well, what would I do? I would make a selector, and I'd select the demo ID, and then I'd apply a style, right? Like a, color red or something like that. You don't need to do this. I'm just showing you what I mean, right? Well, the query selector allows us to do something very similar in JavaScript. So you go query selector, you put a round bracket, you put a little quote, and I can even, if I want, I can even just copy paste my selector here and stick it right in here. So now I'm actually selecting that same area, but not in CSS. I'm selecting it in JavaScript. So selecting it in CSS is good because it allows us to do styles and things like that. But CSS cannot change the actual content. It can make it look different. It can change the colors. It can change the spacing and all this stuff. But it can't change what we actually are reading in that line of text. Whereas JavaScript can let us do that. So try this. I'm going to say inner HTML. The HTML is all caps there. Equals JS rocks. Boom. See what happened? We changed the content. Not just the look of the thing, we're changing the actual document. This is the whole point of JavaScript. Now there's a bunch of other stuff that you get in there because JavaScript has memory, so it can remember things for us like whether you're logged in. It has logic, so you can say, hey, if this is true, say JS rocks. If it's not, say JS sucks. It can do all those kind of things. And so all web applications and all like dynamic sites are done using this type of method. Do a little test for yourself. See if you can rewrite the next list item there. The second one where I've got that little email or letter or whatever. Just give it a try. See if you can remember the steps to do this. I'm going to give you a second, and then I'll catch up with you. But I can't stand being tethered. It's the worst. So this little one right here, see if you can dynamically get that to change it to something else. You're probably already starting to think of a theme you can do with this. Right? I did IKEA, right? You were doing the IKEA stuff, right? Oh, you can do so much stuff.
I've got it.
Nice. I wouldn't worry about that. In fact, I don't even need this feature. I was just showing that you can use the same selector here over here as well. This one's more important.
Oh, so you don't need the CSS part?
Nah. I just thought it's handy to see that you can reuse your CSS selectors in JavaScript now. So there's basically two parts. Oh, microphone. There's basically two parts to it. The first part is getting yourself a selector. So let's take a look. On this one, we did it by giving it an ID. So that's pretty specific, right? But there's a few different ways you could do it too, right? Like for instance, we saw that we have another type of selector called an attribute selector. So you could do it with an attribute selector as well. So if I go down here, you know, I can just say something like test, and that's an attribute. And you can actually that would work as well. So, you can do it that way. There's all kinds of options for you. So, but I'll just do it with an ID since that's how we did the first one. So I'll make this one ID equals test, just like that. And then over here, we can do a very similar selector. So we're starting to get like some information hierarchy in here. We could do some other things with the attributes as well. Like let's say you were doing like a red versus blue thing, right? And the first one up here is like, I don't know, something from the red team. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's like red versus blue. I'm sure you must know. And then down here is like blue team update. Well, for something like this, maybe we want to use our little attribute selectors. And then we can drop these in. So now we're like, color coding it. Red team's up here. There we go. Now we can also use that attribute anywhere else we want, right? Like in the paragraph, that's reusable as well. So that can be pretty handy for us. So our design it's probably far enough along that we could now use one of these as a template for dynamically generating whatever we need in this feed, right? So we get the design and the styles that we want. We preview them visually just inside the HTML. But I would, at that point, when I'm happy with it, I'd typically go back and delete all of these placeholders, and then I'll take one of them, bring it over into the JavaScript, and use it for creating whatever I need dynamically. Because like I may need thousands of these, depending on what I'm doing. Think how many like status updates you're seeing in Facebook all the time. Well, you do not want to sit there making those manually. That's got to be done with something like JavaScript. And now we're starting to see how we could do it, right? Because we're doing this little manipulation of the page here. So I really want to show you guys. Oh, debug? Sorry, which?
The first line of page 4. Text.
Oh, up here? Mm-hmm. This one here? Yep.
No, not the whole line, just the first line. The text.
This text here?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can actually. Yeah, that's a good question. So we don't really need that there anymore. Yeah, we could just totally get rid of that. Because now the The only reason we might not is if we have a bug in our JavaScript and it fails, we'd at least have some placeholder text in there rather than an empty field. But I mean, that's probably just being way too cautious. I mean, if our JavaScript's failing, we pretty much got to fix it, right? So yeah, that was a good point. So I really want to show you guys this super cool thing that we got with that update in 2015 to the ES6. It's called a string literal. If you haven't seen it before, you could be forgiven because for a long time people didn't really realize we got this update. But now it's like everybody's using it. It's really cool. So at this point, you definitely want to make sure that you've got Babel turned on because this is like a new feature here. But I can show you what it looks like. So right up here, remember I said that JavaScript has a memory and you can put things inside of it. You can reuse it from that memory. So the way we do it is by creating a variable. So how can I explain variables pretty simply? Well, in an application, you're probably going to have a lot of things going on. A lot of things that JavaScript's going to have to remember. So I like to think of a variable kind of like how you have your contact list in your phone, right? So like if I have to remember everyone's phone number who's here, I'm dead. There's no way. I can't even remember my number, right? But because I have the contact list in there, I don't really need to remember it anymore. I just scroll until I see something like your name. I hit the button, it calls you. Doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter what your phone number is, we're going to be able to chat. So a variable is a lot like that. It's a pointer that points to an area in memory in the computer's RAM and its ROM. And if you get really technical, it's things like the stack and the heap and things like that. We don't really need to know any of that stuff, but let's make one of them. We'll make a little variable here. And in ES6, we do this by saying let. And I will say template equal. So let me put a little note because this is us making our first variable. So what this does is it alerts JavaScript to say, hey, take a section of memory and section that off because I want to remember something. I'm going to put something in there right now. And what we're going to put in there is this thing that we call a string literal. And here's how you make one. You might never have used this character before. On the very top left of your keyboard, if you look physically on your keyboard, underneath probably of your escape key, there's something that looks like a little worm, and then there's something that looks like a little, it almost looks like a quote underneath it. Hit that, and you'll get something that looks like a single quote, but it's technically not a single quote. Isn't the little wiggly worm thing the tilde? I think this little thing. Yeah, that's tilde. We want the other thing that's on the same key. Yeah. So don't hold shift. Yeah. And you'll get, don't be fooled because it looks like a quote, but it's slightly more angly, right? Somebody told me it's an accent grave. I don't know. But in code terms, we use this to create a string literal. So if I say make a string literal, I'm talking about those guys. Now what this allows us to do, and this is so awesome, it lets us put HTML in there, right? It allows us to actually write HTML in our JavaScript. That is awesome. So like if you do something, and you can even give yourself spaces and things like this, and it's literally just like writing HTML in here. So if I do something like this, h1, OMG, my first template, right? So what we've done is we've said, hey JavaScript, I'm going to give you this little chunk of HTML, put it in your memory because I want to use it at some point. So if we were to go back to our little query selectors here, and let's say we changed this one to use that little template we just made. This might actually be a little bit screwed up looking. Because you see what has happened? I've put an H1 inside my H4, so now it got like super big and it's kind of screwed up looking. But you see how we use that, right? So what I'm going to suggest is this. Let's head over to our HTML, and I'm literally going to copy this whole first list item. So you just want to be careful that you know, you get the whole thing. So look for the beginning LI and the closing LI. I'm going to copy that. Now, just for a moment, let me turn off these little query selectors in the JavaScript here, just so I don't mess things up too badly. And then I'm going to go in here and replace this little H1 with the code that I just copied over from my HTML. So you see how this is working? We're creating a template out of one of our nicely styled items here. So we're going to do something fairly drastic next. We're actually going to delete a lot of this HTML that we've made. Don't worry, you can always Control Z. There's always undo. So let's do this. We're going to take the whole contents of our unordered list here. So just got to be careful. So there's the closing, right? So I'm just going to cut that all out. So now it's very small, my HTML. I'm going to give this list an ID so I can select it. Maybe I'll call it like feed content. Guys, kind of guess where this is going, right? So we've got this empty shell in the HTML, but we moved what we needed over in the JavaScript, and now we can use a query selector to fill it in. So we'll start with just putting one, and then we're going to like see how we can generate multiple list items. So where this is ultimately going, you'd usually be getting this information out of something like a database, right? Or a REST service or something like that. So like when I fire up this this progressive web application for Twitter, like even now, I bet you can kind of guess how they're doing this, right? Because like it's the same techniques that we're doing right now. It's just they've got massive databases with tons of data, and people are tweeting all the time, and so their challenge is things like, how do we have enough servers? How do we handle all this load? But at the simple level, we can make something a lot like this without it being a huge challenge. So let's give this a try. I'm going to make another query selector here. Document dot query selector. And this is why I've given this an ID here, so that I can use it in my selector. Call it the feed content. Inner HTML equals, and then let's use this new template we've got here. Heyo. Isn't that awesome? Yeah, man, this is looking pretty good. Now, the power of JavaScript is that, like, it can do repetitive tasks for us very fast and very easily. So let's say I want 50 of these, you know? Like if I was sitting there making them myself, that's going to be a long time. I'm going to make typos. It's going to be a big problem. But in JavaScript, here, let's get rid of these little commented out ones because we don't really need those guys anymore. Let's try a little test here. I'm going to make a loop. Now, probably you guys are no stranger to what loops are, but I'm not sure what everybody's background is, so I can just kind of talk a little bit about it. Basically, a loop allows us to run a chunk of code as many times as we want. So typically, your loop will go on maybe for a number of times. Maybe you want to run like 50 times. But loops can also run based on conditions. You can say like, oh, I want this to loop until something happens, like the person logged in, or a timer ended, or something like that. So let's do a basic one. It's called a for loop, and it's going to look like this. You're going to type for, and this is the start of our loop. And our loop needs 3 things. It needs a counter, so that it knows how many times it's run. It needs a condition when it should stop, and it should know how much it should increment the counter each time it runs. Does that make sense, how I said that there? So like, think of it like this. Let's say I tell Charles? No. Bob? No. This guy. Sorry, dude. What's your name? You're not Vince. I know Vince. Aaron, sorry, dude. Yeah, so let's say I tell Aaron, you know, I want you to run X amount of laps on the track, right? So like when you're running laps, that's like pretty tiring. You could easily lose track of how many laps you've run, right? So maybe you have something on your phone that each time you do a lap, you're going to hit it and it goes up by 1. And when I see 50, thank God I can stop, right? So that's exactly what we need to do in our loop here. So let's first of all make the counter. So you're going to give yourself round brackets, and you're going to say let, and we make a little variable. Now typically people will call it I, which is short for increment, right? So we're going to say let I equal 0. So this is us setting our counter to 0 to start with. You put a little semicolon. Next comes the condition where it should stop. So let's say it should stop when, we'll say while I is less than, let's say 20. Oops, sorry. Having trouble typing. Less than 20, right? So we're saying like, as long as the counter is less than 20, do it one more time. Then the last thing we do is we say each time I should go up by 1. So add 1 to the counter each time we run this code. Then we create a little curly brace, and we put our code inside the curly braces that we want to run. Woo! Yeah. Okay. Feel like this is probably going to work. So I'm going to take this little chunk right here that we're running one time, and I'm going to cut, and I'm going to paste it inside of our loop. Now it's not going to work just yet. We'll have to make one small little change, but I'll put it in there. Now, if I was expecting to see like 50 of these or 20 of these, it doesn't look like it worked, but it did work. The problem is that it's replacing, like every time it runs, we're saying, here, put this template in there. So it is doing it like 20 times, but what I want is for it to like stack them on top of each other. So it's pretty easy to do. Instead of just saying equal, we're going to say plus equal. Now that plus equal basically says take whatever HTML you've already made and add one more on. Isn't that pretty cool? Yeah. Yeah, man, this is awesome. So then the other thing that makes these template literals or string literals so powerful is that you can actually insert dynamically into them the content that you want to use. So I want to show you how we do that as well. How much time do we have?
240.
How much? Oh, great, man! We can make Facebook. Let's do this. So, so let's do something here. This is going to be cool. This next little part. Let me show you first of all the simple way of doing this. Let's say I want to take this little this H4 here that we've got. Let's say I want to put my name inside of there, right? So we'll do a simple example here. Make yourself a second little variable here. I'm just going to call it my name equals Tom Cruise. Oh yeah. What's his new movies? I always forget. He like beats everybody up. It's you know, he's like the army guy and he like wanders the country. They were pretty good, but I can never remember what they're called. So give this a try, guys. This is kind of neat. You can literally go right into your template here, put your cursor where you want to insert this information, and you're going to do this. You're going to put a $sign and 2 curly braces, an open and a close. All right? Now what this does, it's like chopping a hole in the middle of your template, and into that hole you can put a JavaScript expression. So let's do the simple one here. We'll just stick in that name we've just made. Tom Cruise 20 times. That's neat, right? See how that works? It's pretty good. What if we want to make our second line dynamic as well? Let's say this is now like a movie feed or something like. So we could say like latest movie. Now it's really bugging me. What is it called? His new movies where he's like an ex-military police and he goes around and he like beats up everybody. Anybody? Really? Hold on, I gotta find it. Hold on. It's bugging me now. Tom Cruise.
Jack Reacher.
Oh, Reacher. Thank you. God. That was gonna kill me if I didn't figure that out. Starring in Jack Reacher. Something like that. So let's stick the latest movie in here. So guys, remember how we do this? We take out the stuff that we want to make dynamic. We put a $sign, open and close with the curly braces, and then we can stick in our JavaScript. So in this case, it's just a little variable. Ooh, hope I'm not getting sick again. Apologies to anybody on the stream. I'm probably coughing right in your ear. Yeah, so this is, you know, this is getting pretty good. But you see, it's still not that smart yet because it's repeating the same information over and over again. So what we want is for the information in each of them to be unique, right? So to do that, I need to, how are you guys feeling so far? It's okay so far? Like, because I wouldn't mind showing you one more thing if it's all good. And that would put us in a really good place with this thing. So yeah, let me show you one more thing. So the other big strength of JavaScript is collections, right? Collections of information. Up to now, these little variables we're making here, we call them primitives because they don't hold that much for us. They're very simple things, like a little sentence. We call that a string, or a number, right? Or a true or false. We call that a Boolean. So those guys are what we call the primitives. But you have some other data types in here. And one of them, let's make one. One of them is called an array. So I'm going to make a little area in memory that I'm going to call feed. And what you're after is these square brackets. So the square brackets allow you to create an array. So an array is a collection of information. So let's say you have more than just one of these primitives. A collection will allow you to store like a list of them. So the way I like to think of it is this. If this row of people in that desk right there is my array, each person who comes in and sits down gets a number. And if I want to speak to somebody in that row by their number, and I call out the number, we should be able to figure out who is who. So the first person who comes and sits down, let's say you got here first, and you're the first person in, you sit down, you get the number 0 because you're first. And computers, for whatever reason, don't start things with 1, they always start with 0. So you're number 0, you're number 1, which makes you 2, yep, and that makes you 3, yeah, exactly. So if I say, number 1, tell me your name, who talks to me? Oh, 0 is telling you. 3 is piping up as well. Number 1? Number 1, hello? Do, do, do. Exactly, like you're number 1. So when I want to access the information, I do it by number, right? Now, here's the reason why I'm doing this little scenario here. What you need to understand about arrays is that arrays do not allow there to be a gap in the numbers. So let's try something here. Bear with me. I apologize. No one told you this would be physical. But number 2. Who's number 2? Okay. I want you to leave the row. You don't have to leave the room, just the row. Just for a second. Just for a second. No, do it, do it. Move, 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 go, 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 move, move, go, go, move, move. Yep, not kidding. Go, go. Just for a minute. Go, go, move out of the row. Yeah, please. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so what happens, as soon as you leave, we now have a new number 2. You see what I mean? Right? Because it doesn't let there be a gap. So like that is something you really need to know about arrays, right? As soon as one is taken out, then everybody after that gets assigned a new number to fill in that gap. So if I was still expecting to say, oh, hey, number 3, get me a sandwich, I'm going to go hungry because there is no longer a number layer like that. Come on back. I'm so sorry. But it's like, without like visualizing it, that concept can be pretty tough, right? Yeah, sandwich would be great. So that is how arrays work. I almost like to think of it like a deli counter. You know when you go to the deli and it's busy and you're like, oh man, I need prosciutto or something like that. And they give you a number, right? And the numbers go in order. So if you can't get your stuff until they call your number. Arrays work the exact same way. So let's put some things in our little feed here. And what I'm going to put in here, it's going to look a little strange because I'm going to show you guys right away the second type of data collection that we use in JavaScript. So maybe I can put a little note here. make an array because, excuse me, arrays are very good with loops, right? If you look at our little loop that we've made down here, sorry, I'll scroll up in a second, but look at how it works. It's based on numbers, right? And we've just said every person that is in the row is a number, so we could actually very easily make a loop that would go through each person in the row. So that's why we want to use that one. But what makes them good also makes them not great for us humans. They're very good for loops because they're number-based, but we as people, programmers, it's kind of hard for us to do everything based on numbers. We're more used to giving things labels, right? So let's say, let's say I have a bad memory and I'll stick a label on this. It's my phone. I have my label maker and I'm like, oh, wallet, keys, that's how humans work. So fortunately, there's a data type in JavaScript that works that way as well. So here's what it looks like. It's called an object, and we create one by making a curly brace, like this. Now we can put as many labels and values in here as we want. The label is called a key. So, so let's say, I am doing this movie star thing. So I'm going to say the first movie star in here, well, I think we all know it's going to be Tom Cruise. So that's a little more readable, right? Like, it isn't number-based. And what do we want to know? We want to know his movie that he's in. Jack Reacher. So maybe that's good enough for my first little list item here. But I want more list items. I also want, I don't know. Who's our next star in the lineup here? Who should we do? Anybody? Who's good? Give me a name. Mel Gibson? Man, we're pulling out all the oldies. Mel Gibson, cool. What's a good movie with Mel Gibson? Which one? Oh, yeah. And for good measure, let's put one more in. Give me a starlet. Maybe, I don't know, Nicole Kidman? Pretty good actress, I guess. Although I can't remember anything she's been in at the moment. Give me a Nicole Kidman movie. Anybody? The Others? Let's try that. Great. So we've got our little list going here, right? Now, if we were to flesh this out into a full app, this is the kind of thing that would go into a database, right? But we're not going to hook up a database for our little demo here. But what we will do is use this feed in our loop now. All right, let's go down to our little loop. Let's make a simple little change first of all. Let's just, we won't worry about the content. We'll just worry about how many times this items are being rendered out. So where I've got 20, which is just some number I pulled out of the air, try this. Say feed dot length. Let's see how many we get. So we got 1, 2, 3, right? And how many of these little objects do we have in our array? 3. So this shows it's running however many times we have items in our feed. So we're starting to get what we want here. Now what it's not doing, it's not updating the Tom Cruise and the second line in there, but we can get it to do that. Let's make a little change. Is everybody good so far with that? Everybody's all good? Oh, I had info in there twice? Dang. Well, it doesn't seem to be holding me back. I'll keep going. So here's the thing. The reason why it's not updating as it renders our little items here is that our template is outside of the loop. What we actually have to do is take this template and bring it inside the loop so that every time it runs, we can have it update our little dynamic areas in here. So let's do this. I'm going to copy the whole string literal here. So be careful because you got to make sure you get that little closing dealio. Yes, that's what I will call it. It is a dealio. So we're going to cut that. And we're going to go inside of the loop. So now we're in the code that gets repeated here. Give ourselves a little room here. And we're going to paste it right in here. Now, we'll have to make a couple little changes to get this doing exactly what we want. But we're pretty darn close. So in our template, we've got two variables. One is called my name. One is called latest movie. So let me show you how you can get that information out of the collection and stick it into the template. So it's going to look like this. We're going to say, let my name equal, and here's what we need to do. First of all, we're going to say, go to the feed, right? Because we've put this feed, this array, into memory now. So since it's in memory, we can now get the information back out again. So how do we get information from an array? We use a number, right? Remember our little demo here. So what number am I going to use? This is where the magic happens. I is the incrementer, right? So every time this loop runs, it's the I starts at 0 and it goes up by 1. So what's going to happen is every time this loop runs, I has a new value. So it starts at 0, then it's going to be 1, then it's going to be 2, which means if these three guys are, like you're Tom Cruise, you're Nicole Kidman, you're Mel Gibson, sorry. But you see how this works, right? Like you're 0, you're 1, you're 2. So each time the counter goes up, it means I'll get a new value. So we'll go to the feed, and this little chunk right here, this feed I, what it's going to give us is the whole object here. So if I want just the name, then I have to use that little name label to get just the name. So here's what I mean. It's actually pretty straightforward. I'm going to say dot name, just like that. Oh crap, it's working. It's actually already working. Isn't that cool? So here's my question to you. Can you also get the latest movie showing up? It's a very similar thing that you need to do. Give it a try. Give it a try. I'll tell you, a big part of learning programming. You want a hand? Do you want to debug? Do you want to shoot me your link and I'll take a look? Hit me. Let's do a debug. On the professor mode session, if you open the chat window, you can paste in your link and we'll we'll get her working.
Got it.
Nice. If you're wondering like how to bring up the professor mode session, in Leaflet, it's the green lesson pen link here. If you click that, it should launch this one, and you'll see this purple bar up here, and that means you'll be able to access the chat window. Because I guarantee everybody's having probably some issues. We can work it out together. Let me complete this little demo here. So I'm going to say let latest movie equal. So then I'm going to do the same thing, right? I go to the feed. Oh, not read. I go to the feed. I use the number of the incrementer. But then this time, what do I need? It's not name. It's movie. Yeah. So let's grab the movie. And boom. Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty happy with how far we've gotten today. Were you able to get that? Oh, yes. It's definitely worth doing. After you do that, man, I'll be able to fix anything that you throw at me here, so.
So how would we go about changing people's pictures? Do we just go into the...
Yeah, good question, good question. So the question was, if we want to customize the little icon that's appearing there, like let's say we want to have avatar pictures or something, how would we do it? So we would basically need to rewrite the style property that's being used there to change the URL of the background. Now that's one way we could do it. We could also do it by having a class for each one of the images we want to use and dynamically applying that class inside of our loop as well. So I'll definitely show you how to do that. I think maybe we've done enough for today. We covered a lot of ground. But there's two good methods we can use for that. And actually, if you dig through some of the demo links that I've posted, you can also see in there how they've done it, if you're super stoked. So what do you think, guys? Huh? You know, like, this is the thing. When people start to learn JavaScript, so there's this guy, oh God, name escapes me at the moment, but he's like a long-time JavaScript developer. He worked at AOL, he worked at Yahoo, and like a lot of those places that were there from the beginning. And he always says that JavaScript is the only computer language that people use before they learn it. And what he means is like, people are very inclined to find some piece of code online and copy it and paste it in there and try and use it. And I would, like, in the beginning, when you're new to this stuff, I would really say, like, try and avoid doing that. Because it can make you feel like you've accomplished things that you kind of haven't. You know what I mean? And it can really confuse you, because there's like a lot of different ways of writing JavaScript. There's, you know, a ton of different ways of doing things. Some examples are better than others. When you're new at this stuff, you should really be trying to like write your stuff from scratch, like we've done today. Like, I feel like you guys have pretty much got what we did today. Would you say? You know, some new concepts. It's a lot to think about. But you've been able to handle it, and you've done it yourself. And when you do it yourself, you're going to learn it so much better than if you're just trying to use something that someone else has provided. So what I'd say is, like, with what you've done here, you know, take it and maybe enlarge on it a little bit. We've seen some things, for instance, like the attribute selector, and you can use that for changing colors and some things like that. That'd be pretty cool. Even working with the content that you've got, right? I pulled this movie star thing out of my butt here. I really don't want to see movie stars from you. You know what I mean? Like put your own spin on it. Use your own originality. You know, you've seen in some of my other demos that I put this inside of a frame that looks like an iPhone or something. If you took a stab at that, that'd be pretty cool. We have worked a little bit with the position property to move things around. Like, could you move this to put it in front of a phone screen? That would be pretty cool. It may or may not work, but it's a lot better doing it yourself like that when you're learning than trying to use some pre-made thing. So that's my strong suggestion for you there. It's also a lot more satisfying. When it actually works, it's awesome. What about our links? We've seen how to do hover states on links. That would be a nice thing to see, you know, small thing, but the more you practice this stuff, the better you're going to get. I am going to show you how to replace that link with something like an icon or a button, but in the meantime, you know, use what you know. So let's see if we've got any debug here. Nice. PC McLean? All right, let's do it. Let's take a look. Okay, guys, help me out here. All right, so I do see a little like warning thing here. Let's see what it thinks the problem is. If we click it, then let's see. Oh, I see it. I see it. Right here, this is missing. This needs a closing round bracket right here. There we go. So that gets rid of that one. But we're still seeing something stopping us from this loading. So one thing I recommend, if you hit F12 on your keyboard, it will open up your little developer tools here, and sometimes it will show you if there's an error over in this console here. So let's see. Let me refresh the page. And hey, this is looking good. You already got like multiple icons showing up. This is awesome. Now we do have one error. It says can't set property inner HTML of null. So when I see that, it's usually something to do with our query selector. What it's saying is like, I'm trying to select this part of the page, but I can't find it. So let's take a look at your query selector here. Might be this one. So it's trying to find something with an ID called fdemo. So if I copy this and I go over to the HTML, I can do a search if I hit Control F for find, and I'll paste that in there, and let's see. That's what it is. So I think what's happening here is like probably previously you had this little ID in here, but since we've switched it over to use this loop, that's not there anymore. So you can actually just get rid of this first one here, and then looks like do we still have something? Let's check our second one here, feed content. That's what, I see what it is. So right up here, sorry, is it, I'm trying to remember, it's Patricia? Patricia. So right up here, Patricia, inside of this section here, where we have our unordered list right here, we gave it an ID, which we called feed content. There we go. So you see right over here, now our query selector should be able to select it based on this ID that we've added in here. And then, let's see, let me just clear this, give it a quick save. give it a quick refresh. Yeah, there you go. So this is looking, yeah, look at that. You got like tons of them showing up now. Yeah. So let me send you this work, and then you can either use it to fix yours up. I'm going to send it back to you in the chat window. So let me copy this URL here. We call it a fork. It's basically a copy of the work. So if I send this right back at you. So I apologize. I know it's kind of a pain in the butt, you know, having to make the CodePen account and then verify and stuff like that. But this is the advantage of it, because like now we can work super collaboratively, and even sometimes in your feedback, we'll be able to put in a link to a fork that, you know, sometimes it's just a little easier to show the code rather than write a huge explanation. So I think you'll like it. I think you'll like it. Anybody else? Anybody else having any issue there that I can help out with? Nice. We didn't lose anybody. This is so good. Okay, so so let's just talk about what you can do this week with this thing. What I'd really like to see is like a bit of a concept coming together, right? Put some thought into it. That's your main mission. Is like figure out what you want to use your newfound power of lists to do, right? So it might be related to what you've been doing up to now. If you wanted to do an IKEA thing, like, oh, these are the latest IKEA things, or these are videos of people who freaked out trying to build IKEA, like something like that, you could do it. But if you want to change direction, this is a good time to do it. So I know like some people were doing the Whole Foods thing. Maybe it's just because that's what we started. If you want to do something else, that's totally good. Do take a little look at those past examples that students have done, because there's been some pretty nice work in there, like some pretty creative ideas. And yeah, now here's what I'd love to see. We've put all of this just on the stage by itself here. But in the previous class, we've seen how to create a 2-column, right? So what would be really great to see, if you can have your list item in one column and have a second column just with a simple little description of what you're trying to do, that would be fantastic. Yeah, and that will be kind of the start of building our promo for the App Store. Sounds good, right? Okay, don't forget to look for your feedback. 2 days from now, first round feedback. A couple of people got caught because, you know, we give the first round of feedback, but when you get that second round of feedback, that's basically it. We don't look in it after that. We're on to the next lab. And a couple of people got caught, and some of their updates were after the final feedback, and that's unfortunate. So just make sure that doesn't happen to you. Look for your first round feedback 2 days from now.
So I'll be getting feedback just from Theo, right?
Yeah,
No?
yeah. Let's see how it goes.
So yeah, to change the